I was just a week away from marrying the love of my life, Amelia, when my entire world crashed down around me. My father, Charles, the man I had looked up to my entire life, betrayed me in the worst possible way. I discovered text messages on Amelia's phone that revealed they had been sleeping together behind my back. The two people I trusted most had been lying to my face while carrying on an affair in the shadow of my upcoming wedding. I felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it right in front of me. If you are watching this from somewhere comfortable, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and let me know where you are watching from before I continue with the most painful story of my life. For 30 years, I had always seen my father as my hero. Charles was everything I aspired to be one day. He built a successful business from nothing, provided our family with a comfortable life, and always seemed to prioritize family above all else. Growing up, he coached my baseball teams, helped with school projects, and gave me advice when I struggled with tough decisions. He was my rock, my mentor, my guiding light. 5 years ago, my mother lost her battle with cancer. It destroyed me. But Charles appeared even more devastated. They had been married for 28 years, and I watched my father grieve deeply. He threw himself into work, never dated again, and often spoke about how no one could ever replace her. Instead, he focused on supporting me and building the family business even further. I met Amelia at the law firm where we both worked 3 years ago. She was brilliant, ambitious, and had the most captivating smile I had ever seen. We hit it off, immediately dated for 2 years, and I proposed on our anniversary. She said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face as I slipped the ring on her finger. I thought I had found my forever. When I introduced Amelia to my father, they seemed to get along wonderfully. Charles welcomed her into our family with open arms, treating her like the daughter he never had. He even insisted on contributing significantly to our wedding expenses, saying he wanted us to have the perfect day. I was touched by his generosity and support. As our wedding date approached, I noticed subtle changes in Amelia. Her mood swings became more frequent and unpredictable. One moment, she would be excitedly discussing wedding details, and the next, she would be distant, checking her phone constantly, with a strange expression on her face. I attributed it to pre-wedding stress and tried my best to be understanding. Around the same time, Charles began dropping by our apartment more frequently. He would bring gifts for Amelia, expensive bottles of wine, designer accessories, claiming they were to help with wedding preparations or early wedding gifts. While I appreciated his enthusiasm, something about the frequency of these visits started to feel off. There were increasingly suspicious phone calls Amelia would take in another room, text messages she would quickly hide when I walked by, and mysterious meetings about wedding preparations that seemed to run unusually long. My best friend Jackson noticed it too. One night over beers, he cautiously mentioned that he had seen Amelia acting strangely around Charles at our engagement party. Something just seemed off about how they were interacting, Jackson said carefully. The way she touched his arm and laughed at everything he said. The looks they exchanged when they thought no one was watching. I dismissed his concerns, attributing them to his general cynicism about relationships. Jackson had gone through a bitter divorce the year before, and I thought he was just projecting his own trust issues. I could not have been more wrong. 1 week before our wedding, everything fell apart. I needed to call the restaurant about last-minute menu changes, but my phone had died. I asked to borrow Amelia's phone while she was in the shower. That's when I saw it. A text notification from Charles popped up on her screen. Last night was amazing. Cannot wait until Hudson is on his business trip next week, so we can be together again. My hands shook as I unlocked her phone, knowing her password from countless times watching her enter it. What I found destroyed me completely. There were hundreds of messages between them going back at least 3 months. Intimate photos, plans to meet, details about their secret rendezvous at my father's apartment, the same place where my mother had once lived. When Amelia came out of the shower, she found me sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face. The color drained from her face immediately. She knew what I had discovered. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. With my father, of all people. She did not even try to deny it. Instead, she sat down across from me and confessed everything. Charles had pursued her aggressively, showering her with attention and gifts. He offered her things that, according to her, I could not provide: stability, maturity, excitement. I was not ready to get married, she admitted. Charles made me feel alive in a way that scared and excited me. When I asked if she planned to end things with him, she looked away, unwilling to make that promise. In that moment, I knew our relationship was irreparably broken. The woman I thought I would spend my life with had betrayed me with my own father. The pain was so intense, I could barely breathe. I left our apartment that night, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of rage and sorrow. The next morning, I drove to my father's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I needed to confront him face to face. I needed to look in his eyes as he explained why he had betrayed his only son in such a devastating way. Charles answered the door in his bathrobe, coffee in hand, looking surprisingly calm. It was as if he had been expecting me. I pushed past him into the living room, the same room where countless family photos still hung on the walls. Photos of my mother, photos of us as a family. The hypocrisy was sickening. "So I guess you found out," he said, his voice devoid of any shame or remorse. "How could you?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage and hurt. "She was going to be your daughter-in-law. We were going to start a family. Your grandchildren, Dad. Your legacy." Charles scoffed, taking a sip of his coffee before responding. "It is just basic male instinct, Hudson. Amelia is young, beautiful, ambitious. She needs someone with experience, someone who has lived life, not a boy still trying to figure things out." His words cut through me like a knife. This was not the father I knew, or perhaps this was who he had been all along and I had been blind to it. "You have never been able to keep a woman happy, Hudson," he continued, his voice cold and calculating. "Just like your mother, always needing more than I could give." The mention of my mother sent white-hot rage through my body. I lunged forward, stopping myself just inches from his face. "Do not, you dare bring Mom into this," I hissed. Charles did not flinch. Instead, he placed his coffee mug down and leveled a threat at me. "You work for my company. You live in a house I helped you buy. Your entire life is built on my foundation. If you make a scene about this, if you try to come between Amelia and me, I will cut you off completely." For the first time, I saw the real Charles, the manipulative businessman who had always used money and power to control everything around him, including his own family. I realized then that my entire adult life had been shaped by his influence. I worked at his company. My finances were entangled with his. Even my social circle consisted largely of people connected to him or the family business. I left his house that day feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The two people I trusted most had not only betrayed me but threatened to isolate me completely if I did not accept their relationship. The magnitude of their betrayal left me reeling. With a week to go before the wedding, I had to make the excruciating calls to family and friends to cancel everything. I could not bring myself to tell them the real reason, so I simply said that Amelia and I had decided we were not ready. This led to a wave of confusion and judgment. Many assumed I had cold feet or had somehow mistreated Amelia. "Hudson, are you sure you are not just scared of commitment?" my aunt asked during one particularly painful call. Every couple has pre-wedding jitters. Even some friends seemed skeptical of my vague explanation, subtly taking sides without knowing the full story. I became increasingly isolated, falling into a deep depression. I stopped going to work at the family company, stopped answering most calls, and spent days just staring at the walls of the hotel room I had moved into. Only Jackson and my friend Sophia stood firmly by my side, offering their homes, their ears, and their unwavering support. Jackson even provided evidence that Charles and Amelia were now seeing each other publicly, barely a week after our wedding was supposed to have taken place. "They were at Riverside Restaurant last night," Sophia told me gently, showing me a photo someone had sent her. Charles paid with the company credit card. A $500 meal. The revelation that Charles was using family business funds to wine and dine my ex-fiancée added financial betrayal to the already overwhelming personal one. It was another sign of how little regard he had for me or for ethical boundaries of any kind. 2 weeks after canceling the wedding, I ran into Margaret, one of my mother's oldest friends, at a coffee shop. She took one look at me and knew something was deeply wrong. When I finally broke down and told her everything, her face fell in a way that told me she was not entirely surprised. "Hudson, I hate to tell you this," Margaret said, reaching across the table to hold my trembling hand. "But your father has always been this way. Your mother knew about his affairs." The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My mother, the woman who had always embodied grace and strength in my eyes, had suffered in silence through my father's infidelities. "She stayed for you," Margaret continued, "and because financially she felt she had no choice. Charles made sure all their assets were tied to the business, and she worried about what would happen to you if she left." Margaret revealed that Charles had a pattern of pursuing younger women, particularly those connected to his family or business. She even suggested that he had once made advances toward my previous girlfriend, Natalie, though Natalie had immediately shut him down and tried to warn me. I had dismissed her concerns as jealousy or misunderstanding at the time. Days later, while gathering the last of my belongings from my childhood home when Charles was away, I discovered an old diary of my mother's in a box in the attic. Reading her private thoughts about my father's betrayals and her decision to stay for my sake broke something inside me. I had idolized my father, while my mother silently endured his betrayals, and now I had become another victim of his selfishness. I felt I had failed her by continuing to respect and admire Charles after her death. The weight of that realization, combined with the fresh wound of Amelia's betrayal, brought me to my lowest point. But it was also the catalyst I needed to finally take action. After weeks of wallowing in pain and self-pity, I woke up one morning with a clarity I had not felt since before the betrayal. I looked at myself in the mirror and made a promise I would not be a victim anymore. Charles had taken enough from me and my mother. It was time to fight back. My first step was to consult with a lawyer not connected to my father or his business associates. Thomas, a Harvard-educated attorney, specializing in corporate law, agreed to meet with me discreetly. I laid out everything I knew about Charles, the business, and my mother's position in the company before her death. "Your mother was actually a founding partner in the business," Thomas explained after reviewing some old documents I had found. "She owned 25% of the company's shares, which, according to her, will pass directly to you upon her death." This revelation changed everything. For years, Charles had led me to believe that I was simply an employee of his company, that my position was a gift from him rather than my birthright. He had hidden my mother's partial ownership and my inheritance from me, likely manipulating company documents to maintain complete control. With Thomas's help, I began meticulously documenting evidence of Charles's financial improprieties. We found records of him using company funds for personal expenses, luxury vacations with various women over the years, expensive gifts for Amelia, even a secret apartment in the city that did not appear in any family records. I reached out to Robert, my father's former business partner, who had mysteriously left the company 5 years ago. Over lunch at an out-of-town restaurant where we were unlikely to be recognized, Robert confirmed what I had begun to suspect. Charles forced me out by fabricating financial discrepancies and threatening to report them to the board, he explained. He wanted complete control, and I was the last person with enough shares to challenge him. Robert still held a small percentage of company stock and had connections with other minority shareholders who had also been mistreated by Charles over the years. Together, we formed a coalition of investors who had grown increasingly concerned about the company's direction under my father's exclusive control. Armed with both legal standing as a significant shareholder and evidence of financial misconduct, I was ready to confront my father. But I knew a direct confrontation would give him time to cover his tracks. Instead, I worked with Thomas to call an emergency board meeting, citing serious concerns about the company's financial management. The day before the meeting, I carefully prepared my presentation, gathering all the evidence into a compelling narrative of Charles's abuse of power and company resources. I contacted keyboard members, privately sharing just enough information to ensure they would attend, but not enough for word to get back to Charles about the true purpose of the gathering. I also took steps to secure my personal finances, moving what money I could to new accounts not connected to Charles or his banking associates. Jackson and Sophia helped me move to a new apartment under a friend's name to give me space to work without Charles's knowledge. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a sense of grim determination. I dressed in my best suit, the one my mother had helped me pick out for my first day at the company. It felt fitting to wear it now, as I fought to reclaim what should have been our shared legacy. Charles arrived at the boardroom, with his usual confident stride, nodding dismissively in my direction. He had been surprised to see my name on the meeting request, but assumed I was finally coming back to work after my emotional breakdown. He had no idea what was coming. As the meeting began, I asked to speak first. Charles leaned back in his chair with a smug smile, probably expecting some kind of apology for my absence. Instead, I launched into a detailed presentation of his financial misdeeds, complete with documentation, witness statements, and forensic accounting reports. For years, Charles Hudson has treated this company as his personal bank account. I stated firmly, watching the color drain from my father's face. He has diverted company funds for personal use, falsified reports to shareholders, and maintained a climate of fear to prevent anyone from challenging his authority. One by one, I revealed his transgressions, the misappropriated funds, the secret accounts, the falsified reports. I shared evidence of him using company money to buy Amelia jewelry worth thousands of dollars, to fund lavish trips, and even to put a down payment on a new condo that he had promised to her. Charles attempted to interrupt multiple times, his face contorting with rage, but the board chair requested he let me finish. By the time I concluded, the room had fallen into a stunned silence. "This is absurd," Charles finally sputtered, standing up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "My son is clearly unwell after his fiancée left him. These accusations are the ravings of a bitter, rejected man trying to get revenge on his father." But his protests fell on skeptical ears. The evidence was too thorough, too damning to be dismissed as a personal vendetta. When Robert and two other former associates joined the meeting via video call to corroborate my claims, Charles realized he was cornered. The board voted unanimously to suspend Charles, pending a full investigation, and temporarily appointed me as acting CEO. As security escorted him from the building, the look of shock and betrayal on his face mirrored what I had felt when discovering his affair with Amelia. What surprised me most was how quickly Amelia vanished from Charles's life, once news of his suspension and the pending investigation became public. According to Jackson, who ran into her at a mutual friend's gathering, she had already moved on to another wealthy older man, claiming Charles had misrepresented his financial situation to her. The fallout from the board meeting was swift and comprehensive. Charles lost not only his position at the company, but also his reputation in the business community. The investigation revealed even more extensive financial improprieties than I had initially discovered, leading to legal action and a complete severing of his ties to the company he had helped build. The board unanimously voted to make my temporary position permanent, appointing me CEO with a mandate to restore integrity and transparent governance to the organization. With Robert's guidance and Thomas's legal expertise, I began implementing new financial controls and a more collaborative leadership style that engaged all stakeholders. About 2 months after the board meeting, Amelia reached out via text message. She claimed she had made a terrible mistake and had only been confused and manipulated by Charles. She asked if we could meet to talk about giving our relationship another chance. I read her message several times, feeling an odd sense of detachment, where once there would have been longing or anger. Without much emotional investment, I replied simply, "No thank you. I wish you well." Then I blocked her number. Charles's fall was more complete than I had anticipated. Without access to company funds, and with his personal assets frozen pending legal proceedings, he was forced to sell his house and move into a small apartment. Former friends and business associates avoided him. For a man whose identity had been built entirely on success and social standing, It was a devastating reversal. 6 months after his removal from the company, I received word that Charles was ill. He had suffered a minor heart attack and was recovering alone in the hospital. Despite everything, something compelled me to visit him. I found him looking much older than his years diminished in the hospital bed tubes and monitors surrounding him. When he saw me, a complex mixture of emotions crossed his face: surprise, shame, and perhaps a hint of hope. "I did not think you would come," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered. "Neither did I," I admitted, sitting in the chair beside his bed. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before Charles finally spoke again. "I have lost everything," he said. "The company, my reputation, my home." He paused, looking directly at me for the first time. "My son, you lost those things because of your own actions," I replied, not unkindly but firmly. Charles nodded slowly. "Your mother would be proud of you. She always said you had a strength I lacked." "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "Was it just about control? Or did you actually want to hurt me?" "I never thought about hurting you," he answered after a long pause. "That is the problem. I never thought about you at all. Only what I wanted in the moment." His voice broke slightly. "I have been that way my entire life. Your mother knew it. She stayed anyway." "She stayed for me," I said. "Yes," Charles acknowledged. "She was a far better parent than I ever was." It was as close to an apology as I would ever get from him. Not enough to heal the wound completely, but enough to begin the process of letting go of the anger that had consumed me. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding not just the company, but my life. I sought therapy to process the betrayal and loss, joining a support group for people who had experienced similar relationship trauma. Hearing others' stories helped me realize that while my situation was painful, I was not alone in experiencing profound betrayal from those closest to me. I established a charitable foundation in my mother's name, dedicated to supporting women facing domestic abuse and financial control. Working with these women gave me a deeper appreciation for what my mother must have endured and the strength she showed in protecting me from the truth for so many years. Gradually, I began to socialize again, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones outside the business circle that had been dominated by my father's influence. Jackson and Sophia remained my strongest supporters, never once saying "I told you so" about their early suspicions of Amelia and Charles. A year after the canceled wedding, I met Grace at a charity fundraiser for the foundation. She was smart, kind, and refreshingly direct. When I eventually shared my story with her, she listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and expressing genuine empathy for what I had experienced. Unlike Amelia, who had been impressed by my family name and position, Grace seemed interested in me as a person separate from my company or status. We took things slowly, building a relationship based on honest communication and mutual respect. Her patient understanding gave me space to work through my lingering trust issues, while her own integrity helped restore my faith that not everyone will betray those who love them. Charles passed away quietly, 18 months after his removal from the company. Despite our complicated history, I arranged and paid for his funeral. It was sparsely attended, a stark contrast to the grand social events he once hosted. As I stood by his grave, I felt a complex mixture of grief, not just for the father I had lost, but for the father I had never truly had. The company continued to thrive under my leadership, though I made sure to maintain a healthier work-life balance than my father ever had. I implemented policies that supported employees' family commitments and personal well-being, determined not to perpetuate the toxic aspects of my father's business philosophy. The greatest lesson I learned through this painful journey was that betrayal from those closest to us inflicts the deepest wounds, but it does not have to define our entire lives. I learned the importance of establishing healthy boundaries in all relationships and recognizing red flags rather than dismissing them out of blind loyalty or love. I came to appreciate the true friends who stood by me during my darkest moments, valuing their honesty and support more than the fair-weather companions who had disappeared when my social status temporarily faltered. Most importantly, I discovered that while revenge might provide momentary satisfaction, true healing comes from reclaiming your own power and rebuilding your life on your own terms. Making Charles face consequences for his actions was necessary for justice, but my real victory was in breaking free from his influence and creating a life and company that reflected my own values rather than his. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach us the most valuable lessons, not about them, but about the strength within ourselves we never knew existed. If you have ever experienced betrayal or loss, know that it is possible to rebuild and even thrive afterward. Your worth is not determined by those who failed to appreciate you. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story in the comments below. Have you ever had to confront someone who betrayed your trust? How did you handle it? Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe to hear more life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that they can survive betrayal and come out stronger. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the people who are meant to be in your life will never make you question your worth.